If you want a really unnecessary argument about status reports, or if you want some arguments that are going to help you to aggravate your PMOs, you've come to the right place. Hey team, I'm Stuart Taylor from Influential PMO, and I'm here to support my colleagues in the project community, and to have a rant about status reports. I've seen so many status reports over the years in so many formats. Actually, it's the same content, it's just shuffled around to look different from place to place. And in almost all places, there's one piece of content in there that tells us absolutely nothing. The risk RAG component. In most status reports, you'll get a set of traffic light indicators, and they'll tell you about the health of the project overall and its key components such as planning, quality, costs. And for some reason, a lot of these reports will have a component for risk. And I honestly don't see the value of it. At best, it tells us nothing. At worst, it drives bad behaviors. Let me explain. By the way, if you want to tell me in the comments that I'm wrong about this and present an argument for why there should be a risk RAG component, go right ahead. I actually welcome the feedback. Keep in mind, having a measure requires some sort of standardization around what that measure means. The first reason I hear about it being there is to be used as an indicator about how many risks are on the project. And this is a pretty common view that I hear. But what's the use of that? The project isn't necessarily out of control because it's got a lot of risks. If they're being managed appropriately, things are fine. And suppose you have lots of low-level risks that are going to exist for the entire duration of the project. Should you be reporting non-green for the entire lifespan of the project on that basis? How's that useful? It just distorts the view of the project. How about if the risks are severe and you haven't got around to mitigating them? Well, most of those risks are going to impact things like the plan or the budget or one of the other major components that are on that traffic lights chart. Wouldn't it make more sense then for that component to be marked as non-green? If a risk emerges that's going to make your project deliver a month late, why wouldn't you just reflect that in your plan RAG instead? Now, in this world of having the risk component RAG, you'd probably end up having the plan RAG reporting non-green and the risk component reporting non-green. So why? Wouldn't that just distort the message of the status report? If you follow that line of thinking, then because the project's going to be later, often that means that it's going to cost a little bit more because you're going to have resources involved for longer potentially. So does that mean that the budget RAG has turned non-green now? So now you've got potentially 3 components reporting non-green, all off of one risk that may happen, don't forget. And in a lot of places, that's enough to turn the project overall from green to non-green. So you see how this can distort the view. Now maybe that risk on its own is sufficient to actually turn the project into a non-green state, but you don't need the risk component RAG driving that. You've got plenty of reason in the plan and the budget to do that. So the risk component RAG in this situation is redundant. The next reason I hear about why to have a risk RAG component is to be an indicator of whether the risks are in control or not. Now, project managers do tend to be very busy people, and often they end up being too busy to do all the right things. And that's something they often end up paying for somewhere down the line. Now, if you put yourself in the place of a project manager who's reporting on various things that can drive a non-green state, they'll go ahead and do that. But are they going to report that they're not doing their own job? Have you ever met a project manager who's keen to advertise on their status report that they're not fulfilling their responsibilities? The problem is the risk RAG score doesn't give context. So a risk could well have emerged on the day that the status report was being written, and the project manager just hasn't got around to actually coming up with a mitigation plan yet. Now, until they actually come up with a response plan, they can just mark any of the other components as being impacted by this risk. There's no need again for a risk RAG. The next reason I tend to hear is that a significant new risk has just emerged and you need to draw attention to it somehow. You got a whole damn status report to do that. You don't need the risk RAG to do it. And as stated before, you can still reflect the impact in other component RAGs. If you're getting value from this video, don't forget to hit the like button. Now, a reasonably good explanation for why you could have a risk RAG is to indicate whether the project is exceeding the project's overall risk tolerance. There is some merit in this, but it involves and requires your organization to be mature enough to track these things. It also involves the project manager needing to know what that risk tolerance level is. But if that's not being recorded or tracked, then what exactly are you basing the score on? A hunch? My observation has been that the risk RAG component actually drives the wrong behaviors. Overly cautious project managers will score themselves amber for huge amounts of time during a project, just so that they can demonstrate they're not overly confident. As if when systems crash and customers start complaining and Sky News turns up on the doorstep, the sponsor's going to pat the project manager on the back and say, yeah, well done for being cautious. But it fools project managers into thinking they're doing something when they're not. Reporting something as red or amber doesn't mean you're being proactive. You still have to go and act on these things. Whenever I see a project that's got a constant non-green risk RAG score, I challenge the project manager and say, why aren't you fixing your risks? And the response tends to be, well, there's a lot of risks on this project. And the response from me is always the same. Manage them. Are you in control or not? If you're saying for the entire duration of your project that your risk RAG should be non-green, that doesn't say that you're in control, does it? Here's a quick tip to anyone who has any sort of say about these status reports. If there's no useful reason for having a risk RAG component, get rid of it. As I said, this is more of an opinion than a rule, and I'm interested to hear your opinions, so put your views in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more rants about status reports.